Welcome to the War Story Podcast. I'm your host, Geraint Jones, and for those of you listening for the first time, welcome. We're glad to have you. Quick bit about myself. I'm a former infantry soldier. I'm now an author. A lot of my work is concentrated on military history, and that's kind of how the podcast came about, because a lot of the interviews that I would use for source material come from people in their 70s, 80s, 90s. So the aim of this podcast is to get people's stories down while they're fresher. So trying to get people as close as we can to the conflicts that they served in. If you are one of those people who's maybe serving in a conflict or has recently served in a conflict, we'd love to hear from you. Please do get in touch. We're always looking for guests. We've been very lucky with the people that we've had on the podcast, and there's millions of stories out there, and we want to get down as many as we can. And someone who's on a same mission and doing an amazing job at it is Mr. Nick Laidlaw. He's a former United States Marine Corps infantryman, now a journalist, absolute great guy. He's been very good to me in helping to grow the podcast and helping with my own projects. So, Nick, big thank you to you for all of that. And for anyone listening today, please do go and follow Nick if you're not already. You'll probably know him as Battles and Beers on Instagram, social media. Does incredible work, and the stuff that he's done for Ukraine has really helped for me to kind of get some kind of a picture. I mean, obviously, there's only so much you can know without actually being in these situations, and Nick has done as much as he can to bring that to us. But he's also gone out there himself to see things with his own eyes, and I really enjoyed talking to him. It was a great conversation. So without further ado, let's get into it. Nick, welcome to the podcast, mate. Long time overdue. Glad we finally managed to balance schedules, all that kind of stuff. Balance lawn mowing, as we were just discussing. Great to have you on, mate.
Yeah, thank you for having me on. I'm excited to chat with you. And yeah, you're right. It's been a long time coming. I think it's like over a year now. We've been trying to get this done. So.
Well, I feel like you and me are both on the same mission, right? Trying to document war stories, essentially.
Mm-hmm.
Seems like that's what we both spend a lot of our time doing. And thank you for, you're always really helpful on social media, sharing my posts and things like that, mate. So I really appreciate that.
Yeah, of course.
So, where does that obsession come from? When did it begin?
I think that probably began for me with my grandfather in the First World War, or the Second World War. Like we had spoken before, he was a British soldier in Burma, and my entire family knew nothing about his service. Like he went to the grave with all of his stories. Like all I know is that he was a British soldier in the Second World War, and he was in Burma, and that's it. And so that always really frustrated me growing up, because I would hear other kids at school, because we're still the generation where it's like our fathers or our grandfathers were those World War II veterans. Now it's like, oh, my great-grandfather or my great-great-grandfather. I was always very frustrated that other kids at school, like, they still had their grandfathers around, and they had all these crazy, cool, or like horrible stories about what granddad did in the war, and I had nothing about it. And I don't know, I never felt very close to him because of that. He died when I was young, and so there's no big relationship there anyway. But I began to feel a lot closer to him after I started going out and looking for these stories, to try to relate to him in a way. And especially during the war in Ukraine now, where it's become a lot more personal, I think that's a big motivating factor to keep going out and getting them and documenting as much as I can.
So as people could probably tell from your accent, you're American.
Yeah.
So do you think in your grandfather's generation, do you think Americans were more willing to talk about experiences, maybe? Because what you're saying there about your British grandfather is the kind of experience that I had with my grandfather until I was in the army, really. And then he started to open up a bit more. But he only really talked to me about most things. He didn't speak to a lot of the rest of the family. I think that's what I hear as a generalization. I hear he didn't talk about it more than he did talk about it. Now, obviously, some did talk about it. But usually when they were asked by museums and things like that, it seems to be. So do you think in America maybe there's a bit of more of a cultural difference?
I would think so, yeah. Especially, I think, because of just how veterans are celebrated so much here. And so I feel like it's a little easier, I think, for American veterans to speak out, especially now. I mean, you can really see it now in the current generation of how easy it is for veterans to go out and speak. And like they've got like a community that wants to listen. You know, I'm not sure how it was like immediately after the Second World War. But I think however that culture was back then has now kind of molded into like the safe space, if you will, where veterans can speak freely about what they experienced in war without too much judgment. And I think that was probably the biggest thing back then, especially for Europe. Well, one of the things I think was pretty big was the war wasn't in the United States. It was in Europe, you know. And so I feel like a lot of the European veterans didn't talk about it so much because the war was in their backyard. You know, like I know my grandfather, he was married in London during a German air raid, you know. And so it's like my grandmother has war stories. So it's like, why would I talk about it if everyone's got one, you know?
Yeah, mate, I totally agree on that one. And I think the First World War had a big part of that as well, because, you know, now we're like 20 years removed from 9/11. I can start to understand that, you know, like Chamberlain always gets a lot of shit for not wanting to, you know, for not acting sooner against Germany. I'm thinking, God, 20 years now is nothing. So when when you've got like that, essentially it's a fresh memory, right? Mm-hmm. So like now, you know, you look at 20 years ago, I mean, we're kind of seeing it at the moment, you know, with the Iran situation, and a lot of people remember Iraq very well, and they go, we don't want to do, you know, we don't want to do this again. And
exactly.
When you've had like World War I and you know, what is it, like 1 in 10 British guys killed or something like that, you know, I think it's almost like the Second World War almost becomes an extension of that as well, you know, because people, like you said, you know, they might have lost cousin and uncle in the First World War and then a son in the Second, and you know, I think it's almost like there's just been that so much war in like a 30-year span that, like you said, by that point it's been a part of people's lives. Maybe they just wanted to move on. So for you then, that seed had been planted in terms of wanting to know stories, but what about your own desire to serve yourself?
That's a direct result of 9/11. I was in second grade when 9/11 happened, and I remember watching it happen on live TV. You know, I think most Americans who were old enough at that time have a similar story. I remember we were sitting in the classroom and my teacher just wheeled in this TV on like a little cart, and we watched both the towers fall down and all the people jumping off the buildings to their deaths and having no idea what's going on. And then 2004 rolled around and I saw live footage of the Battle of Fallujah with the Marines. And I remember thinking, okay, that's what I want to do. Like, those guys are really cool. This looks really, really scary, what they're doing, but they're going out and doing it anyway. And it's like, I want to be one of those guys, you know, where it's like, that just seems insane. I remember footage of, you could see like bullet impacts on the road as they were crossing it. And I remember thinking, like, how are you running into that? Like, that just seems psychotic. And I was like, well, whatever kind of man those guys are, that's what I want to try to be. And so that was kind of my goal after that, from 2004 onwards, was to join the Marine Corps. And I did. The day I turned 17, I dragged my mom down to the recruiting office and had her co-sign with me to sign up. And then 6 days after high school, I was at boot camp. I actually enlisted like the day Bin Laden was killed.
Oh, no shit. So second grade, how old would that be?
7 or 8.
Oh,
I was little.
I'm going to date myself here, but I have the same wheeling in TV moment for the Gulf War. Like, just, one of the only things I can probably remember from that age. But that kind of leads me to another question, actually, is when you were in that classroom when the TV got wheeled in, when I was in the classroom, admittedly, quite a few years earlier, when that TV got wheeled in, we both had a certain reaction to that most people in that class did not have. So, based off that, do you think that that there's already like a seed in you and then it gets watered, or do you think it gets put in there later on?
I think it can depend on the situation. I think for a lot of young men, I don't know how many, but I think there are a certain number of young men who always have that seed in them, like when they're born. And when something big like this happens, they just feel like they need to be a part of it somehow to assist in some way, Like I see a lot of that in Ukraine, where the war started in 2014, and there's like all these guys who are already helping back in 2014 before they had to in 2022, that sort of thing. And then for others, I think it becomes a necessity where they get involved in events as the events are happening, and they become part of them whether they want to or not. And they end up being very good soldiers as well at the same time. I've met plenty of mobilized people who are very good soldiers. But yeah, 9/11 was definitely, there was some water poured on the seed for me. Seeing that happen on TV, and then not quite knowing how I wanted to be involved in it because I was so young, but knowing that I did want to be. I remember being a little kid in 2004, watching the Battle of Fallujah and almost being worried that like the war would be over before I was old enough, Little did I know.
Yeah, I think we were all in that boat, mate. Before we learned a lot, put it that way. So when you graduated high school, then what kind of, because everyone else your age graduated would have seen 9/11, will have been the same age when it happened. Because I've spoken to some guys who were kind of a bit older at the time, and there was quite a few. They'd say that quite a few of their high school graduating year or graduating class would go into the services when it was very fresh, in their first year or two. What was that like by the time that you enlisted? Had it worn off at all?
I would say, yeah, it had, because I enlisted in 2011 and I left for boot camp in 2012. So my graduating class in high school was 162 people. And I think 6 of us joined the military, and then 2 of us joined the Marine Corps. And I was excited. I didn't care at all that my friends still got like a whole summer to be kids. I was ready to go earn the right to put on a uniform and become a Marine. But yeah, I would say the interest in the war, especially by that point, was tanked. It was barely anybody that I went to school with even knew that the war was still going on, So, and I think that's true for the entire country.
When you got to, which boot camp was it that you went to, and what were your first kind of impressions?
I went to Marine Recruit Depot, San Diego. I remember everyone because everyone like YouTube something, when they're really interested in it. I remember watching all these videos on like boot camp and like how scary it is or how hard it is and stuff like that. And I remember sitting on the bus, because you fly the plane in to San Diego Airport, and then some drill instructors pick you up outside, and they stick you on a bus. And I remember looking around at like all my peers, and like everyone had these like, oh shit kind of faces on. And I didn't have that at all. I was so excited. I was like, let's go. Like, I can't wait. I was so ready to just give myself to the system, not fight it at all. Just let them indoctrinate me. Cause I was just so excited to be a Marine and, have the opportunity to go to war. I was very motivated. I remember being very confused, because they do that intentionally. They drive you around before you get onto the base. Everyone's screaming at you on the bus. They park the bus. A drill instructor gets on, yells some commands at you. Everyone just gets herded off like cattle. I remember thinking like we're just like a bunch of sheep right now, just being herded from point A to point B. No one has any idea what's going on. Drill instructors are screaming orders. No one's listening to them. Like one person is listening to them and everyone else is just following that guy, because everyone's so scared and disoriented. But I remember just thinking, I love this chaos. Like this is fun. I have no idea what's going on, but I think this is going to be a fun 3 months. And it was. Hindsight, like boot camp was one of the best times of my life.
Hindsight.
Yeah. Hindsight.
So when you do the boot camp then in Marines, is it all the different branches of the military in together to begin with?
No, the Marine Corps has its own boot camp. And that's the same.
I'm sorry. I meant trades. So you've got
yeah.
If you join the Marines, everyone's kind of in together for those first few months.
Yep, everyone's together for the first 3 months, and then after that you go to your like initial MOS school. So I went to boot camp, and then I went to the infantry training battalion afterwards. And the infantry training battalion was a lot harder than boot camp. I remember being very proud to like earn the title of Marine at the end of the 13 weeks of boot camp. But at the end of the school of infantry, I was like, this was tough. I was like, this sucked. Like I'm way more proud to earn the title of infantryman than just like a basically trained Marine. Yeah, everyone of all jobs. My rack mate was like a what's it, like a water purification specialist in boot camp. That was his job.
Yeah. So when you're there with everyone from chefs to water purification specialists, are the infantry guys, are you sticking out? Are you starting to form your own little kind of groups and stuff? Are you already getting that Rev versus infantry mentality?
Not at that point, because you don't have time to really talk to anybody. I think I can remember like only 3 or 4 conversations in the entire 13 weeks of boot camp. I would like whisper to my rack mate, like after lights out, but you don't, like, when you're that early in your military career, you don't know enough to form like cliques or like have pride in what your future job is going to be. You're just kind of concerned on, okay, I just need to get to afternoon chow. Okay, I just need to get to evening chow. Okay, I just need to get to bed. And then it's just a cycle of that. You're just more focused on yourself and frankly, if you get caught talking to someone else, just conversation, like you're going to get smoked outside. So, yeah.
So, when you got to the infantry, then was there a moment where it clicked for you and you were like, oh yeah, this is really what I want to be doing with my life?
Yeah, and it was the same moment where I was like, oh, I made a mistake. I remember it was the 5-kilometer hike to the grenade range. It was probably like the first week we were at the School of Infantry, and we had like these, I don't remember how heavy they were. There was very heavy packs. We had our rifles and our helmets, and we were going to do a 5-kilometer hike to the grenade range. But it wasn't a hike at all. It was just a sprint up these hills in Southern California. I remember like looking in front of me and seeing, like 50 or so Marines. And I remember looking behind me and seeing the other 200 of them spread out, like maybe across, I don't know, like 10, 12 soccer fields. And we were all sprinting like up this mountain basically. And I just remember thinking, this is way harder than boot camp. And this is like 6 days in, I made a mistake. Like, I don't know if I could do this for the next 5 years. And then as soon as I threw a hand grenade, I was like, okay, yeah, I picked the right job. This is fun. Like, this is way too cool.
How did you feel? I always think it's a pretty interesting experience, either holding a grenade yourself for the first time or seeing other people hold one for the 1st time. What was that like for you when you first had your hands on like a live grenade?
I remember thinking like, wow, this is like a lot heavier than I thought it would be. And I remember like sitting in this grenade pit, and it's like this concrete, like U-shaped structure that's underground, like a trench. And I remember seeing all these chips in the concrete around me that looked like blast fragments, which it was. And I remember thinking, okay, don't be one of those idiots that drops it. Like, just pull the pin, throw the grenade. Like, that's all you need to do. And that was actually what went through my mind in Ukraine the last time I held a grenade, was that first moment that I held one in boot camp. The Ukrainians love the M67 fragmentation, like the ones we use. They love them. But yeah, holding a frag grenade, I was like, wow, I really made it. Like, this is the real Marine Corps. Like,
so during both of these periods of training, obviously the Marine Corps got a very storied history. Are you made aware of these lessons? Is it part of the program to be taught like Marine Corps history?
Oh yeah, at all times as well. And then at that point of time in the Marine Corps, you're walking among the history. You know, like if you remember the Battle of Fallujah, there was First Sergeant Castle, who I believe was awarded the Navy Cross for rescuing a bunch of Marines. He was my battalion sergeant major. You know, one of the most heroic people of our lifetime was just sitting over there, you know, watching us train. Most of my instructors were Marja veterans. You know, that's one of those mantelpiece battles that the Marine Corps will like put on the mantelpiece, and like 10 years later, they're like, wow, like we did that. That was the Marine Corps sort of thing. And they were all my instructors. Yeah, in boot camp, you're taught all about the history. It's all brainwashed into you. November 10th, 1775, it's Marine Corps birthday. I think you'll be hard-pressed to find someone in the Air Force or the Navy who knows their branch's birthday. But yeah, Marine Corps, it's been 13 years, and I still haven't forgotten that. Or like Opha May Johnson, the first Marine Corps, the first female in the Marine Corps, World War One. But yeah, the focus on tradition and our history is great. And that's another reason why I loved the Marine Corps so much. Everything was about like the honor of the branch, you know. And it was very cool to be a part of while I was a part of it.
Would you go as far as saying that the Marine Corps is a cult?
Oh yeah. 100%. Yeah. The Marine Corps is definitely a cult. I was explaining to my fiance the other day, it's like if you're in the military, it's like you aren't a Navy, you aren't an Army, or you aren't an Air Force, but you are a Marine sort of thing.
Yeah. No, dude, I've met a lot of cultists as in Marines, and yeah, I couldn't agree more. I love it. I absolutely love it. But yeah, so when you're in training then, what are your expectations for active duty at this point? Because like you said, Marja's happened, Fallujah's happened nearly 10 years ago at this point, I guess. So what are you realistically thinking that you're going to get out of get out in terms of deployments when you get to a battalion?
So when I showed up, the Battle of Marja had only happened 2 years previously. And so in my head, that's what I was expecting. And then when we were there, all the instructors were like, the war's basically over, guys. Like, maybe a couple of you are going to go to a battalion that ends up deploying to Afghanistan or doing anything combat related. And I remember like just being gutted at hearing this news. You know, I was like, oh my God, like I grew up with this war and now I'm going to miss it, sort of thing. And that ended up being the case, you know. But there were still a couple battalions that went to Afghanistan and did some fighting. while I was in. It turned out that a lot of my peers were ones who did that, and I was immensely jealous. You know, not jealous in like a sort of nefarious way, just like, oh man, like you got to test out your skills, sort of thing. Because people ask me all the time, it's like why would you like be upset about that? And it's like, well, picture you're, like you're an athlete and you practice every single day, all day long, but you never play a real game. You know, it's like, how do you know if you're any good at the sport? You know, like it's all fun. And like you can say you're good at it and you would perform well if you're just playing against a computer or some cardboard cutouts, you know, but you never really know until it's a two-way conversation with you and the enemy. And that's what I wanted. But fortunately or unfortunately, that's not what the Marine Corps had in plans for me. But, you know, even with the knowledge that I probably wouldn't be going to war, I was still excited to be a Marine. You know, I was still excited to go to the fleet and to my battalion and train and be proud of myself. You know.
Tell us a little bit about barracks life in the Marines.
Oh my gosh. So it's almost like a prison hierarchy a little bit. Like you've got the sergeants who aren't like in your free time, like the sergeants aren't around a lot because most of them are married and live out in town. And so it's kind of run by the corporals. And yeah, it's very much like a prison hierarchy, like someone, like they walk past you in the hallway or outside, it's like eyes down to the ground and you give them a greeting, and however they're feeling that day, they'll give you a greeting back or take you around a corner and haze you for whatever reason, you know, like your greeting wasn't motivated enough, you know, so they have to beat some motivation. Stuff like that. But barracks life was fun. You know, that's probably one of the things I miss the most about the Marine Corps is having all my best friends just next door. You know, now if I want to see them, I got to hop on a plane and fly 1,500 miles, which sucks, but you know, that's the way it is. But yeah, barracks life was very interesting. I always lived in really, really old barracks that some of them were actually condemned and still not being torn down and rebuilt. I remember having to move all this furniture out of a room to paint over black mold on a wall and then move all the furniture back in. It's like, I don't know how safe this is. But, you know, I enjoyed barracks life a lot. You know, I had, like, most of the time you had a few roommates, especially if you were fresh to the fleet. You would have usually 2 or 1 roommates. You know, room inspections every Friday. I enjoyed that. When you're a corporal or above, you typically either just have 1 roommate or a room all to yourself, which I liked even more, you know. Played a lot of Xbox, did a lot of training. Depends on where you are at, too. So, like, I was in Camp Lejeune most of my time, and so we were right next to the woods and the swamps and stuff like that. And so the NCOs typically weren't too motivated to go out and train in the swamps in your free time. So it was a lot of like classroom work. And then a lot of the actual like training out in the woods and stuff was done formally by the company or battalion. But yeah, barracks life, I miss it. It was fun. I think that's what everyone misses is just having the boys next door.
Yeah, 100%, mate. I just want to note as well, in case people can hear it, that's as much as I am enjoying the stories, that's not me purring. My cat has joined the podcast, so
yeah, mine's around there somewhere.
So if you hear purring, it is Lolo right now. So when you were serving, mate, it's like I said, you didn't get the chance to get out on a deployment. Did that play into your decision to leave? When did you make that decision?
So most people have a 4-year contract, but I had a 5-year. And so by the time 2017 rolled around, I was one of the more senior corporals in the battalion. And I remember thinking, it's like, I can roll the dice, stay in another 4 years, maybe go to war. Or I can get out and just start my life right now, like start my adult civilian life. And I remember looking back and thinking like, okay, I've spent like a lot of my time, especially in the last year, just wishing I was somewhere else. And I thought that's not a healthy way to live, So I thought, okay, I'll get out now, and then another big war starts in the future. It's like I doubt they're going to turn me away, sort of thing. But I did join the reserves immediately afterwards, and so I went to it's kind of like the National Guard, and so I went to go drill with the Marine Corps Infantry Battalion once a month from 2017 to about 2019, almost 2020. And so that was a good way to like wean off of active duty, because I still wore the uniform once a month. I was still around Marines. We were still training. It felt the same. It just felt like I was also in college at the same time, living a civilian life. But yeah, I think, around 2017 is when I left active duty, and I thought, okay, it's probably my time to just move on and accept that I took this loss in the experience that I wanted, sort of thing. But if I would have known what I'd know now, I'd be like, all right, you need to get out and go to Ukraine like right now. Sort of thing.
Yeah. All right, let's switch fire onto Ukraine then. When did your interest, one, in journalism, and two, in Ukraine, start to kind of manifest?
So both of them kind of happened by accident. I remember starting a podcast with a few buddies that I had served with, called Battles and Beers, and it was just, we'd be sitting around drinking, talking about historical conflicts, because like back in the Marine Corps, I was always that guy in the smoke pit who would be talking about history, or like this story in a book that I had read, and I'd be like, oh, isn't that like amazing, sort of thing. And I'd always been posting that stuff on my Facebook. And instead of continuing to spam my personal Facebook, a buddy of mine motivated me to start an Instagram and a Facebook page called Battles and Beers, and start a podcast. Well, the podcast is like a horrible failure. Like it turns out it's really hard to get like 5 people on and to stay sober enough to talk about something historically relevant for an hour at a time. And so one by one, they all kind of like fell off of the Battles and Beers thing, but I stuck with it. And as a solo creator, I wasn't just going to like get on and just talk, by myself. That's not really the type of creator that I am. And so I would just read books and then post those excerpts online. And the Battles and Beers just started growing, like people started following the page and commenting, and a lot of people started commenting their own stories of similar context. And I thought, wow, like this is really cool. There's all these stories out there that are just sitting in people's heads, and they're going to end up like my grandfather one day, just go to the grave with them. And so I started asking people online, like, to share their stories with me. And that picked up a lot of steam. People seem to like react very well to like bite-sized pieces of people's lives from war. And so like that's kind of like the bread and butter of what I do, is I present war stories to you in like a very easily consumable way, where it's just like little pieces here and there. It's not like a whole book on someone's entire experience in the military. It's just a few highlights of how they felt during different moments of being in war. And yeah, that's kind of what the page was from 2018 to 2022. And then I remember late 2021 following this guy called Cossack Gundy on Instagram, and Aiden Aslan. And I saw he was this British guy fighting in Ukraine as a Ukrainian Marine, as a mortarman. And I was like, what on earth? Like, this is so strange. Like, what's he doing there? So I started following him and talking to him, and got me very interested in what was going on in Ukraine. He was very helpful in connecting me to other people in Ukraine. And that's when I really started investing a lot of energy into that war there. And then as soon as the Russians crossed the border on the 24th of February, I would argue I was probably in the first 1,000 people in the West to be aware of that. Like as soon as it happened, I was getting text messages from people at the front line being like, it's happening.
Yeah, we've had Aidan on the podcast actually, so shout out to him, good dude. And that would have been like 2014, kind of post 2014 then.
Mm-hmm.
So one question I want to ask in case I forget to ask it later is, you know, you've got a job, you've got a life and everything. How many hours a week would you say you put into this? Into Battles and Beers, because you're relentless on your story. I would say storytelling, story presenting, however you want to kind of put it.
Yeah, I always call myself more of a carrier pigeon than a journalist. All I'm doing is just bringing stories from one point to the other. So I work as a registered behavior technician for children with autism between the ages of 3 to 7. And so I do that Monday through Friday, 8 to 5 every day. And then in the evenings, I'll come home, I'll take like a 30, 45-minute nap. And then pretty much from then on until I go to bed, I'm doing something Battles and Beers related, whether it's cruising online, looking for new people to talk to and to interview, or conducting interviews, or editing interviews. So it's literally a second job. What I would love is to be able to do this full time. And that's sort of the goal. And I've got some things moving in place now that I'll be able to talk about later, to hopefully transition away from like a regular civilian job to a more permanent war journalism. But yeah, I spend a lot of time doing it, and it doesn't feel like work either. You know, it's almost like leisure for me. It's fun. You know, like I love going on these trips, and I love having conversations with people, because speaking to these guys who are enduring these things and like actively going on right now, I feel like it feels for me, because I'm not like a big sports fan, but I feel like for me it's like getting to talk to like Wayne Rooney every day, or like David Beckham, or like, it's like all of them are celebrities to me. So it's just it's very humbling and honoring, you know, especially when they reach out to me, you know.
Yeah, dude, I totally get it. I am actually a sports fan as well, but the only autographs I collect are from like Second World War veterans.
Yeah,
they are like pride and joy. Okay. All right, mate. So, talk us through then how you went from being interested in the war, talking through people on social media, to actually going out and visiting the troops on the ground.
Well, I remember thinking, because by this point I had interviewed like hundreds of guys in Ukraine, and like the whole point of my platform is to help normal everyday people who have not experienced war understand what it is like to be in one. And by this point I thought like, I still don't know. Like, if I truly want to relate to these guys, I need to be there with them and to experience it for myself so I can relate to them properly, and know what questions to ask, and just experience it for myself so I can write about it better. And so that's what I did. You know, I sometime in the summer of 2022, I reached out to Chris Naganuma, who runs Project Leaflet, and asked him if he'd be interested in going on a trip with me. And that's what we did. That first trip to Ukraine was not very kinetic at all. We were a little bit west of Bakhmut, but that was like as close to the front line as we got. Most of it was just like touring older battlefields and stuff like that, because we kind of went to Ukraine that first time without a plan. It was literally just kind of show up and wander around with media passes, seeing who we could talk to. And, I got a lot of interviews done in the rear, but I still didn't experience the front line for myself. And it was a very good trip. I learned a lot. But I still didn't quite get what I wanted, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it makes total sense, mate. And what was the war at that point? Let me do some maths. You see steam coming out my ears. Infantry soldier here too. Right. So this is about 9 months. Yeah, this is about 9 months ago. I haven't got, November's the 11th month, mate. I haven't got 11 fingers, even though I'm from Wales. So we're about 9 months into the war, right? By this point. What was the situation you found kind of in Ukraine, behind the lines in the cities, that kind of thing with the local population?
He was still at that time very heavily militarized. There were army checkpoints everywhere. There was a curfew. There still is a curfew now, but it was a lot more heavily enforced. There's a lot of the destruction of the earlier days of the war still all over the place. I went to Bucha and I went to Irpin and Moshun, locations of these earlier battles. And in Moshun, because I interviewed a lot of guys who were at that battle, and that's just a little bit north of Kyiv. There were still bloody bandages in basements, that Russian soldiers had been in. They were still finding bodies in the woods and stuff like that. And so that was my first time seeing the after effects of war, was these destroyed villages and stuff like that. And then I went up north near Chernobyl to interview a bunch of for lack of better terms, a bunch of Ukrainian hillbillies who had been fighting a guerrilla war against the Russians up there in the woods. And that was a very interesting experience. And then we went down south, and right about this time was when Kherson was being liberated. And so I was planning to go down there, but then a whole bus of media who had showed up got their media passes revoked because they weren't supposed to be there. And so that kind of killed that plan to go film a freshly liberated city. And then we went east to Kramatorsk. And Kramatorsk back then was a ghost town. That's the major hub now on the Eastern Front. That's where all the soldiers go. It's a lot of restaurants open and stuff there. There's a lot of the journalists hang out there. It's this big just hub to get to anywhere else on the front line in that area. But it was a ghost town when I was there. All the windows were boarded up. Now it's completely different. I went back last October and I was wow, this is a different city. This city is alive now. And even then, back then in November 22, everything still felt very uncertain. The war could very much go one way or the other. And the Battle of Bakhmut was really starting to heat up. But still, I was never within earshot of artillery on that first trip.
So when you came back, then you kept doing what you were doing. World being what it is, you clicked. I was going to say begin again, but sometimes when it's not necessarily a new conflict. It's the same one. It's been going on, but spikes again, shall we say? So, what was your experience with going to Israel? You went to Israel. Was it October 23, or do I have my dates wrong here? Hang on.
Yeah, October. Yeah, October. Right after the summer.
October 23. Yeah.
So I remember waking up on the 7th of October and checking my phone and seeing these guys on gliding across the Gaza Israel border. And I remember thinking this can't be real. This has got to be AI, And then it kept escalating. There's videos of that Israeli soldier being dragged out of a tank, drones flying into camera, those observation cameras, people getting shot in their vehicles, the Nova Music Festival massacre. And I remember thinking okay, if this is still going on 5 days from now, I'm going to get on a plane and try to get over there. And so my friend Ilya, who speaks Russian and is Jewish, managed to find a privately chartered flight from New York to Israel. And he's like, if I can get us on this flight, do you want to go? And I was like, absolutely. Like we'll figure it out as we go along, because everything was still so crazy and hectic in those early days of that war. And so 5 days passes, the war's still going on, and we're like, all right, let's go. And so I get on a plane, I fly to Newark, New Jersey, and we waited at that airport for like 24 hours because the chartered flight was still not a guaranteed thing, because at that point I think flights into Israel were closed, like no one was flying in. And so what the plane was for, it was for a whole bunch of IDF reservists to fly back to Israel to go fight. And so we had to like convince the people who were on like organizing this that we were worth taking along, and so I just pulled out my like combat lifesaver certification, and it was like, I'm a combat medic. sort of thing. I'm not, but it's like that was enough for them. They're like, all right, get on the plane. And so then we flew to Israel right away. As soon as we get out of the airport, there's rockets in the air being intercepted, and I was like, okay, like we came to the right place. We take a train down to Ashkelon, which is just north of Gaza, and rocket impacts right down the street from the train station. And I was like, okay, this is going to be fruitful. Then this is my first experience like having my life in danger in war ever, and I was just hyper focused. And I was like, okay, we need to film everything, and that's what we did. And we ended up running into Matt Williams, Willie OAM, Australian guy, another independent journalist. He's fantastic. He's actually coming to my wedding next month. But we met him there, and we were just like a little crew rolling around Israel that whole time. And I didn't get a lot of journalism stuff done when I was there because I was denied a media pass. And active duty IDF soldiers are not allowed to talk to the press, basically. So that was very frustrating. I didn't get any interviews done or anything like that. But I did get to see war firsthand with my own eyes. We had rockets land like 50 meters from us. We saw some of the houses where the massacres took place. We went to like a survivors, what's it called? Like a healing center sort of thing for all the survivors of the Nova massacre. And some of the people there had some crazy, like horrific stories of, just being at a music festival, and then all of a sudden there's guys there with AKs just gunning down groups of their friends. And that was crazy to hear firsthand because that was only like a week prior, And so everything was very fresh. And it was also probably the most unique frontline I will ever see in my life. Because the front line was essentially like the border fence, right? And I spent a lot of time in Sderot, Israel, and you can see right into Gaza from there because it's kind of on a hill looking in. And the IDF, like day and night, had artillery positions, mortars, tanks, snipers, everything shooting in. And then Hamas would shoot like huge barrages of rockets. And you'd stand there and film them, and then you could kind of tell when they were coming your way, so you'd have to like run inside really quick. I remember living in a preschool for a day, having to use the toilet on these tiny little toilets made for children, just sitting there in my body armor, like filling this toilet up. But yeah, it was crazy. Very unique, interesting experience. Probably the heaviest barrage I've ever heard in my life. I was in Pokrovsk in Ukraine recently, and still that barrage was not as dense as the one in Gaza. We'd see jets fly overhead, pop flares after they dropped a bomb. It was crazy. We even filmed a tank shooting someone with an RPG probably like a mile out. It was a very wild time. It was my introduction to combat. I remember the first time hearing a rocket come overhead and like looking at it. I remember thinking like, wow, or not a rocket, artillery, or a mortar or something. I don't remember what it was. But I remember that, they do make the whistling sound sort of thing. And this IDF guy like grabs me and like pulls me down. I was like, oh, wow, they do the sort of thing. But yeah, Israel was, it was not a very fruitful trip in terms of documentation of human stories, but it was very fruitful for personal experience and gaining better perspective on the ground of what it was like to be there in those early days. And that's another war that's just so nuanced. It's hard to...
Yeah, I mean, one of the things today when I was kind of looking at where you'd been and stuff, I thought I'd rather just concentrate on your experiences of going there rather than getting into, I mean, I've seen podcasts that are 30 hours long covering these events that still probably leave room for questions and stuff. So it's just, I'll leave that to somebody else. I'm just, same when I have someone on from Afghanistan or whatever, that served in Afghanistan, we don't really kind of go into much about the what's and the whys and the should it be happening. It's more, what was your experience? Which, because generally when it comes down to the individual, that's usually what matters most, really. It's like, if you speak to someone who served in Afghanistan, they might have opinions about the war at large, but what probably matters most to them was their mate getting killed.
Yeah, exactly.
So with Ukraine, then obviously, you've been continuously, well, if anything, more and more involved with interviewing people and documenting it. So what was your next trip out there, and how was it different to the first one?
The next trip to Ukraine was in October of 24. And so there was like a year-long break where I didn't really do anything or go anywhere. But the October trip was a lot more kinetic than Israel was. And it started out, we went down to Kherson, finally, the liberated city down there. And that was a crazy experience because Kherson was previously occupied by the Russian army. And the front line there is separated by the river. And so it's the city of Kherson in the north, the river in the middle, and then there's Russian occupied territory in the south. And so you can stand in some places in Kherson, look across the river and see Russian soldiers. And it's the city just being like indiscriminately shelled. There's the human safari is what they're calling it. It's where drones just hunt whoever they can find on the streets. And it's just probably one of the most unique parts of the entire front line there. I don't remember how big the population of the city was before, but I think there's something like 50, 60,000 people still living there. Extremely unique experience because you can be sitting outside in northern Kherson at a cafe, drinking coffee, eating a pastry, and then just down the street, an artillery round will strike and hit something, and the people there are so used to it that they don't even react anymore. Like I remember we showed up, we went to go grab some snacks from this store, and there were some kids playing in the street right outside. And I get out of the car, and it's right overhead of us, just, and then just like 2 or 3 blocks down the road, artillery strikes. Kids didn't stop playing once for like 1 second. They didn't even look up to see it. I think there's an average of like 300-400 artillery shells that get fired into the city every day. I don't know anything about the drone numbers, but the further south you go in the city, the more dangerous it does get. 5 or 6 blocks before you hit the river, you start seeing a lot less people. And then the closer you get to the river, the less life you see at all, until not even the dogs, like the stray dogs, are on the streets because it's so dangerous down there. I remember going out to supper when I was there to meet a Ukrainian soldier. And when he met us, he said that the bus stop across the street from his apartment, two old ladies got wounded from a grenade dropped by Russians on them at the bus stop. And that's why they call it the human safari. It's because they're just flying drones around, dropping grenades on whoever and whatever they can find. They're using a lot more FPV drones now. But there's this island connected to the city by a bridge called Ostriv. And I spent a lot of time there because that's more of like the front line part of the city. There's a lot more soldiers there than there are people, civilians. And that's where I visited the trenches for the first time. And that was a unique experience. And just getting to the island is very sketchy because you have to drive over, you drive through this roundabout and you see all these holes in the street there from like artillery shells and grenades that the Russians have dropped from drones. And the civilians there call it like Death Circle or something like that, because of how frequently people get hit there. And I remember so I was with my translator, my medic, and myself, and then there's another and then a Ukrainian soldier in the car with us going across the bridge for the first time. And we turned on the radio, and the Ukrainian national anthem started playing like it does every evening. And everyone in the car just starts like scream singing the anthem as we're driving across this bridge, just going as fast as we can to outrun anything that's observing us. And that's always going to be a core memory for me, because I remember like being because this is like my first experience that close to the front line. And I was so nervous. I was like shaking. I was shaking in the car. I was like, oh my God, I might die right now. But, we just drove right through the checkpoint into an apartment. And there is where I got a lot more comfortable, because artillery is still hitting everywhere, like all the time. But, there's there's soldiers in this apartment just hanging out, enjoying their off hours. We shared quite a few beers together that evening. And then in the morning, one of them hands me a cup of coffee with some kind of liquor in it. And he's like, get up, we're going to go to the drone position. So I wake up extremely hungover, drink this coffee, and then put my body armor on, get in a pickup, and we drive out to a drone position there. And they were having a cat and mouse battle between their drone team and a T-90 Russian tank. And the whole building is just like riddled with huge holes in it from the tank shooting at it. And so they're like, you can hang out here for like a couple minutes, but the tank is a pretty good shot. So like you can't stay super long, which I was kind of upset with because I wanted to be there and present with them. But we were at the drone position and I observed them flying around looking for this tank. And then we left. And then the next morning, it was a little bit foggy. And so those same soldiers were like, hey, you want to go to the trenches? Like, if you're going to go, like, now's the time you got to go because of the fog. And I was like, absolutely, sign me up. And so I remember we were in Ostriv at this, like, coffee stand. And there's all these soldiers waiting to go on rotation, and they're standing there in their body armor drinking coffee. And we were talking about like the drone threats in the area and how it'd been a lot higher the last couple days. And like the thing about like drones and artillery, especially now, it's like if I'm going into an area and all I have to worry about is artillery, it's like I feel so much better. Drones just make everything so much scarier. But I remember waiting for this van to pull up, and I was sitting there like drinking a coffee, like my hand was shaking. I couldn't even tell you what the coffee was. If it was black coffee, if it was flavored or whatever, I have no recollection of that. I was just hyper focused on I could be dead in like 10 minutes. So this van pulls up. It's like an 8-person van, and there's 10 of us. And so we all squeeze into this van, and it's got no electronic warfare jamming system on it. It's just a van that they found, and they're just driving people back and forth between the frontline positions there. And I remember sitting in between two guys thinking like, okay, if this van gets hit, I hope like the meat of everybody else protects me because we can see like across the river, and it's very close to the Russians. And this guy behind me like saw how like nervous I was, and he pulls out his phone and starts playing the Magic School Bus song. It's like all on the Magic School Bus, and all the tension in my body just like flowed away. And at that point, I just kind of accepted like whatever's going to happen is happening. But yeah, we drove out to the front line there with no issues, thankfully, very quickly, going around shell holes in the road. And we get out, run into this concrete building, and inside there's like a whole bunch of soldiers, like putting their gear on to leave, and they run out the door, and everyone's like setting up inside the building who had just arrived. And one of the soldiers grabs me and he's like, all right, let's go. And I was like, where are we going? And he's like, just follow me. And so I grab my camera, follow him out this back door, down this like little dirt road, and straight into a trench. And like 5-10 seconds after we're in the trench, we hear buzzing above us, and it's a drone. And so he yells just to keep running, because they've got like chain link fence above the trench, and it's got like camouflage netting and like plywood up there to like conceal people inside of the trench. So there were no issues there at all. Yeah, we spent some time with the guys in the trenches, filmed as much as we could. It was a very eerie feeling, very unique, and I was just happy to like finally be in it. So it was like, this was like 11, 12 years after I joined the Marine Corps, and I was finally like doing what I had wanted to do. Interviewed some guys in the trenches there. Otherwise, like quite uneventful. This was October of 24, and not much was happening in that part of the front line in terms of like infantry assaults. There was a point further down the line where I was told 6 Russian soldiers on like jet skis had tried to come across the river, and a Ukrainian drone team had buzzed right over them, and one of the guys on the jet skis fell off and immediately drowned, and they assumed it was because he was wearing steel plates. So yeah, there's like back and forth incursions between the Russians and the Ukrainians all the time. And I think for me personally, that would be the worst part of the front line to fight on, because they're fighting on the islands on the river. And so I've got a good friend there now. His call sign is Baker. He's a recon combat medic. And some of the stories he tells me there are just like, they're just horrific. They'll be on these islands from like, sometimes from like 7 to like 60 days. And there's no support. Because like you take a boat across the river exposed to the islands, and you can't dig in because it's all wet marsh and sand. And so you're basically hiding in tall reeds, fighting the Russians at extremely close range. He's got a lot of stories of them in firefights where like you can see the expressions on the Russians' faces that you're shooting at because you're so close. And the weather there is miserable. He said in the summer it's unbearable because of all the mosquitoes and just the heat and the humidity there. And yeah, for me, I think personally that would be one of the worst places on the front line to fight. And they do it over and over. They'll be on the islands, they'll go back to Kherson, and then just back and forth, basically forever. So it's a really tough time for the guys down there, and I've just got enormous amounts of respect for all those guys who keep going back and forth. Because I interviewed Baker, and I asked him like, what had he seen any like acts of like heroism from his comrades while he was on the islands? And he told me simply getting in the boat is an act of courage. Because it's estimated that 70 to 80% casualties each time you go. And by now, he's done over 20 missions to the islands. So it's like this guy has got to have some divine protection or something. Last time I was in Ukraine, he introduced me to his best friend, Max, who's a sniper. He's a great guy. You know, one of the most soft-spoken, humble people you'd ever meet. And he's got stories that would all of them have stories that would be like Medal of Honor or Victoria Cross stories, you know, and that's just an average day for them. Just, it's really hard to put into words, especially because I haven't even been there. I haven't even been to the islands, and it's not someplace, even if I was offered to go, I don't think I would.
Where are these, like, at this point in the war, you know, 70, 80% casualties, where are they getting replacements from to keep I mean, I'm assuming that wounded are patched up and then come back into the line. Does that happen?
Yeah, it depends on the wounds, but typically, like most guys that I know have been wounded at least once, you know, and they're back. Whereas like in the U.S. military, it's basically like, oh, you get wounded, like you can go home, like the deployment's done for you, sort of these things. But these guys, it's like, yeah, as soon as you're like able to like walk and fight, it's like you're going back, which sucks. But I understand the necessity for that because they're literally fighting for like the survival of their country, and like every soldier in a frontline position matters, especially when like a whole like a kilometer of front line is manned by like 7 people. You know, it's like if you lose one guy, that's a significant amount of your fighting power that's gone. Yeah, a lot of it is mobilized guys. It's hard for them to find volunteers because of the nature of the fighting on the islands. Like I said earlier, it's once you go over, you're basically alone. Like any resupply done is done by drone. The good thing is that they've always got drone cover, and so there's no like surprises, I guess, if you'll say that. And artillery and other indirect fire is also less effective there because of the extremely soft ground. They've told me stories of like plenty of very close hits that would have killed them if they're out east in the Donbass, but because they're in wet, sandy ground, the shell just hit the ground and didn't even blow up.
This river, how big is this river, and why are these islands so important?
It's quite a wide river. To my understanding, it's like several hundred meters wide. And the islands are important, especially near Kherson, because they're trying to prevent Russians from getting like a proper foothead there, so they can fire mortars into the city. Because if they can just fire mortars into the city, that's a lot more firepower that they can bring to bear on the civilian population there. Also, as well, it's just good to keep pressure on the Russians there. And the Ukrainians, as far as I can tell, from what I can see there, is they're a lot better island fighters than the Russians are. Because these guys fighting on the islands have been there pretty much since the city got liberated. Whereas new Russian units are being cycled in over and over. And so there's a lot of these new guys kind of trying to figure out how to do island fighting against guys who are very experienced, who have been doing it for almost 3 years now.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like from what you're saying that it's like a battle of like really kind of like small unit tactics and
yeah,
you know,
very much.
Yeah, so
they call themselves the Pirates of the Dnieper is the unit that I chat with a lot. They're very valuable weekends.
That's the river, is it? The Dnieper? Mm.
I believe that's what it's called, yeah. Or the Dnipro or
Dnipro. Well, anyone interested can go and Google Maps it and have a look, because you know we're in Britain right now, mate. Most of the rivers here are about 10 meters wide. So you know, I know you've got some big ones out there. So like, yeah, it's hard. Well, sometimes when you hear these stories, you know, you have to kind of change your way of thinking to that kind of like that European river. So
yeah, this river is very wide. It takes several minutes to cross by boat.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay, mate. So on that trip there, when there's been about a year between your trips now. What are the biggest differences that you noticed in between in that year from kind of autumn or fall of 2022 to 2020? This would be, hang on, let me check my notes again. Oh, sorry, I messed up my maths. That's 2 years.
Yeah.
So I told you infantry. No, don't hold my maths against me. So what are the main differences that you've noticed? Anything in terms of morale of the soldiers, morale of the civilians, and the kind of the tactics on the battlefield?
The immediate difference is noticing how the Ukrainian soldiers were equipped. A lot of them look a lot more modern in terms of their uniforms and their equipment. They looked a lot more like us in Western militaries, like a lot more high-cut helmets, a lot more optics on rifles, visibly more gear on their plate carriers, better plate carriers, and better uniforms too. Like everyone's wearing multicam now. Like the Russians and the Ukrainians are wearing multicam. So whoever patented that is definitely a rich man. And then as far as like the front line, it's definitely the drone density. Like drones were like a concern in 2022, but in 2024, it was like all that anyone was talking about. Was how dangerous it is. Like during my last trip in just a month ago, some units can suffer 70% casualties just getting to the front line. Because in some areas, there are more drones flying in the air than there are soldiers to kill. They'll just fly around until they find something to kill or the drone runs out of battery. Like that's how dense some areas are with drones. And it's terrifying. Like, it's terrifying. I was chased by an FPV drone in Pokrovsk. But going back to how things have changed, Kyiv looked a lot more like a city in peacetime. A lot of the checkpoints and roadblocks have been cleaned up and put away. Lots of the damaged buildings had been repaired. It just felt more peaceful being in the interior of the country. And then you go closer to the front line and it feels more ominous. You can feel like the vibe change as you go east. Like you'll lose signal on your phone because of like Russian jamming and stuff like that. And there's definitely a frustration with Ukrainian soldiers there. I was talking to Baker about it, the river pirate guy. And he says he constantly has to remind himself, like when he goes to the interior of the country, he walks around and it's like there's no war going on. It's like most civilians are just going about their day, just trying to live their lives like they were before the war. And he said it's both upsetting and motivating. He said it's upsetting because it's like just a couple kilometers away. It's like him and his friends are like soaking wet, trying not to get hypothermia while Russian drones are dropping grenades on them in the grass and doing these cross-river incursions while people are just living their lives normally, But he said it's also motivating because like the sacrifices that they are making is enabling these people to do that. He's like, that's the goal. And he said he's got to constantly remind himself that he shouldn't be upset about that these people are living normal lives, because that's what they're fighting for at the end of the day, is for people to live in peace and to live their lives. And I feel like most Ukrainians would have that same train of thought. There is a lot of animosity for soldiers who are avoiding or for civilians who are avoiding military service. Like one of my translator, he was trying to sell a BMW. And he said before the war, it would have sold in 2 weeks. But he said now he's had a very difficult time selling it because no one will come out to look at it because they don't want to get mobilized, because like the people who would want to buy that car are young military age males. So I get it both ways, like I understand like the fight or flight survival instinct, because this is a very televised, very videoed and photographed war. So it's like, I've seen probably 6,000 people die on just video footage, You get probably more footage from Ukraine in a month than all the footage that was taken in World War II.
Yeah, 100.
So the death is very in your face all the time. It's very scary. So I understand why people would want to not be a part of that. But at the same time, it's like, this is the survival of your country, Like what are you willing to sacrifice? And I think that comes down to like an individual decision on what is freedom worth to you. It's a hard question to answer, especially for other people. And I think that's what people are getting upset online about, is that the government is making that decision for you. But again, it's a country, it's a fight for its sovereignty and survival. So I don't think it's my place to say what a foreign government that I don't pay taxes to is forced to do to continue to survive. But that is a concern for a lot of people over there, is the people avoiding military service. And it happens in every country. I think in the Vietnam War, we had 500,000 draft offenders. So it's not just the Ukrainian people; it's any country where there's any sort of draft or mobilization.
Yeah, absolutely, mate. Just one on drones, a bit of a tangent.
Mm-hmm.
The First World War, kind of the use of gas, everybody did it, and then everyone kind of came together afterwards and said, you know what, that gas was bloody horrible. And considering what happened in the trenches, for them to actually like pick one thing out and go, right, this was too much, this was beyond the pale. Let's not do that again. And I've always found it fascinating with the Second World War that even when Germany was clearly losing, they didn't resort to using gas. And I guess part of that was maybe they still had the idea that they might win, and they they didn't use gas. Well, I say that obviously it was used, in extermination purposes, but on the front lines it was not used, and it was used all the time in the First World War. So this wasn't like, like from the Second World War to Vietnam, we're going to refrain from using nukes. This was something that was used day in, day out. Have you heard any people's kind of inclination going towards this drone thing is just too much? We need to this needs to be like one of those weapons of wars that's banned, or is everyone really leaning into it and going, this needs to be where we're going?
I've heard both arguments. A big reason like the Ukrainians are holding the front line is because of a defense in depth with their drones. Like it'll take 10 infantrymen to cover a kilometer of front line, but in reality, they've got 30 drone operators also helping them, and they can strike with fiber optic cables up to 50 kilometers now. And so you've got soldiers having to amass for assaults now far behind the front line. And even then, they're still within range of getting hit. It's still dangerous. I think everyone, now that I have had several drone experiences of myself, universally hates them. But also it is a battlefield equalizer. Like the Russian army, it's bigger. It's arguably stronger. I don't know if it's better than the Ukrainian one, but drones are the equalizer. Like the Russians fire, I think, 10 artillery shells for every one that Ukraine fires. But these drones also have really kind of filled that gap between what the Ukrainians can output towards the Russian forces to destroy material. Instead of firing artillery now, they just strap one to a drone and fly it into something with 80% accuracy. What used to take 50 artillery shells to destroy an enemy bunker now takes 3 FPV drones, So I personally don't think drones are going away. I think they're going to get a lot worse, and that we've got horrors beyond our comprehension in the future. It's already beyond our comprehension now, so we're about to get extra horrors beyond our comprehension in the next big war. But I don't think they're going to go away, and I think there'll be attempts to regulate them, but I don't think anyone's going to listen.
Yeah, like the only reason I think it would happen is because Western militaries, Western powers look at this and go, like you said, this is a great equalizer for the enemy. We've got all these tanks, we've got all these jets, we've got big infantries, big armies, and this is a real equalizer for the enemy, and therefore it's in our interests to regulate. That's the only reason I could, and obviously, means that people have to listen on the other hand. But, we rate a lot of things. I could see it happening because we decide in the West that it's in our interests to do it. But let's move on then, mate, to look, you've mentioned a couple of times you're being chased by one. You sent me a great meme, which I won't spoil because you haven't put it on social media yet. So your most recent trip, that was in May, right, of this year?
Yep. It was just a couple weeks ago.
Yeah, so talk us through it, please.
So that trip was by far the most kinetic one for me. Yeah, it's very fresh in my mind. So the whole trip was basically spent with the Ukrainian 25th Airborne Brigade, and they're a fantastic brigade. Like if I had to join the Ukrainian army to fight on the Ukrainian side, that brigade would definitely be in my top 3. They're very modern, very forward-thinking. I've got the brigade second in command. We text on Signal all the time. Very cool guy. He's like 28 years old, and he's a lieutenant colonel. But I did stop in Kherson on the way down to see Baker, my favorite river pirate, going on down there. Brought him a pair of boots that I had fundraised for him. Because he was complaining that he has, like, the boots he has suck for, like, waterproofing. And so I just surprised him with a pair of, like, brand new waterproof boots. He sent me some pictures of them wearing them on the island. So, like, that feels good to see that. But yeah, then we went out east to Pokrovsk, and that was arguably the worst 2 weeks of my life. It was very scary.
Perfect. Let's hear all about it.
Yeah. So we showed up with the 25th Airborne Brigade, and they started off by letting us observe their selection process. So if you want to join the brigade, there's now a new 3-week course that you have to pass to join. And I will say it, very high standards. It's not an easy course. I was observing a lot of the training there, and they cover everything, like infantry assaults, drone warfare, combat medic stuff. And like, no matter where you're going in the brigade, like, you have to go through that course now. So if you want to be like a medic, you're practicing for trench combat. They live in like underground bunkers that they've constructed to simulate frontline living, and it's very close to the real thing, other than the constant drone threat and artillery. It's very good training. I've even thought about going through it myself to document the experience of what it's like. But I don't want to do Marine Corps boot camp again, so yeah, it looks like very good training.
So, sorry to interrupt, mate. Are these already trained soldiers at this point, or are these
some of them? Yeah, some of them have already gone through boot camp, and then they're choosing to join the 25th. Like, and it's like a brand new thing, and the Battalion 2IC really wants to make it like the standard. They've got people from the Da Vinci Wolves Special Operations coming through the course because they've heard it's so good and they want to try it. If anyone wants to know about the Da Vinci Wolves, just YouTube them. It's some crazy stuff. Very, very good assault unit. But yeah, so I talked to the Brigade 2IC, and after we had gone out with the students training, we were going to go to an artillery position. And so that was my first time driving through an FPV drone net, like those tunnels. So we got up at like 2:00 in the morning, drove out to the artillery position, and they fired off one round on the gun, and then the press officers got us in the car and made us leave. And I was quite disappointed with that, because it was very like propagandized, like very sanitized for media sort of thing. And that's not what I wanted. I wanted to like embed with the units and live with them out there, so I could get the same, like a 24-hour experience with the soldiers. So when we have conversations, we're talking as friends and not just some random guy who shows up to put a camera in their face. So we went out to that artillery position and we got back, and it was interesting. There was a lot of artillery firing and stuff like that, two-way artillery duels, but it was not what I wanted. So we talked to the brigade, and it was basically like, to sum it all up, was like, I want to be in danger. I want to live with your soldiers. And the Brigade 2IC was like, okay, sounds good. Do you want to go to an FPV position tonight? I was like, absolutely, I would love to. It was a 2-day rotation. And so that evening at like 12:00 at night, we drive out to go meet one of the members of the drone team who's going to drop us off. And in all of like the excitement of finally like getting to go out and like truly embed with this unit, I forgot to ask exactly where the drone position was, because they had like taken us to like such a like safe, quote unquote, like artillery position. I figured they'd do like a similar thing with drones. And on the way out there, I find out that we're going to the heart of Pokrovsk. So I was like, okay, like this is about to get real. So we park at this gas station, and we're waiting for the guys in the city to give the okay to drive in, because they're checking for Russian drone density in the air. And basically, like when they see on their monitors that there's not as many drones in the air, they'll turn on this basically like giant electronic warfare machine that'll hopefully jam a lot of the signals for unwire guided FPV drones. So it still has no effect on the fiber optic cabled ones, but it can jam the traditional ones that most people see videos of. So we're parked at this gas station, and they roll the windows down. And I was like, why are you guys rolling the windows down? He's like, just in case, in case we hear a buzzing, like we can get out of here. And I remember there's this mosquito like flying around inside of the truck, like buzzing in my ear. And I was like, man, like this is frustrating. So we get the okay from the guys in the city, and we take off down the road, and immediately we're going like 130 kilometers an hour. We come to another FPV net, except this one is just riddled with holes. You can see drones had slammed into it. Some of the poles had been blown up. There's blown up cars everywhere, all down the road. And we're driving at night too. And so with the headlights on, because they have no night vision. And we drive past this blown up, I think it's called like an M113. It's like an armored personnel carrier. And I remember thinking, like, if they can blow that up, they're going to blow this truck up easy. We enter the city, and it's just trashed. It's like it was a city of 90,000 people, and now I think there's 3,000 people living there. Most buildings have some sort of damage. Blown up cars everywhere, like just burnt out. And we are driving down one of the roads, taking all these turns, and I'm filming this whole thing with my camera. And we come down this very narrow road, and I see like this red light kind of moving. And I see we get closer, and it's one of the drone pilots. So we pull the truck up there. I get out and just run inside as fast as I can. I grab my backpack, just run inside. Inside, I'm greeted by several international guys who are in the 25th as drone operators, so they all speak English, which was very nice. And right away, they're like, it's pretty quiet right now. No one really flies, or no one's moving on the Russian side until about like 4 or 5 in the morning, and then they stop moving around 6. There's more movement at around 11 to 12, and then there's more movement around like 8 or 9 in the evening. And he's like, those are mostly the hours we're going to be flying. And they're like, if anything happens, we'll come wake you up. You guys should go get some sleep. And so we go to the basement where they've got like some little, I would say they're beds, but it's mostly just boxes stacked up with mattresses they had found in houses nearby with mattresses laid on top. And so I lay down and go to sleep, and then like an hour later, I get woken up because they got spun up to go on a mission, and it's like 4 or 5 in the morning now. And so I go film them. So there's 2 things to film during an FPV mission. And so you film the drone taking off. So there's one of the guys going outside to place the drone, arm it. And then there's the actual like pilot and the commander who are in the basement or somewhere else, depending on the position. And they're looking at a monitor, a couple monitors. So the commander gets a live feed from another recon drone of the target, and he guides the pilot onto where that target is exactly. And so I went and filmed one of the guys placing the drones outside, and I ran back inside quick to film the pilot. And very professional guys. They're there to do a job. And it's not like you'd think watching videos, like they're not like, oh, like it's not a game to them. You know what I'm saying? Like some people see videos of like pilots like chasing people around trees and stuff like that, just like having fun with them. And that wasn't the case that I saw here. I will say a lot of the missions were not successful because of I don't know the technical terms for this, but it's like a valley they're flying across, and it's just very hard to maintain the signal all the way across the valley. And then if the Russians have any sort of jamming, it's very hard to get past that as well. And so I'd guess that like at least 50% of the drones that they flew while we were out there just fell out of the sky because of the signal interference of some kind. But they flew that mission, was not successful, so I just went back to bed. And then I woke up probably like 30 minutes later, and I saw the commander looking at the monitors, and so the sun is up now. And I went and sat and observed with him at the products of other drone teams in the area. And so there were all these wounded Russian soldiers they were keeping tabs on, seeing if anyone was coming to help them or whatever. I remember there was one guy that had been struck crossing a field. And that was the thing that was always confusing to me, is like Russian soldiers, you typically see them by themselves, like just walking across a field. Instead of like going through a tree line or anything, they just take the shortcut right across, and that's where they get hit usually. But this guy had been hit, managed to crawl to the tree line, and then he was struggling to put on a tourniquet, and then after a couple minutes, he just gave up and put the end of his rifle in his mouth and ended it himself. And no one said anything. You know, like the drone commander didn't make a comment on it. The pilot didn't make a comment on it. They just like clicked on to the next feed to observe somebody else, you know. And then it was just like it was like a slideshow of corpses, you know, of freshly killed soldiers, where it was like you could still see like the blood pooling around them. they would make comments like, "Oh, this guy wasn't mobilized," sort of thing, because like he's got a nicer pair of boots on, or this guy's got like a more kitted out rifle or a better helmet, stuff like that. Very detached. And that's kind of just how it went for that first 24 hours. So initially we were supposed to only be out there for 24 hours. And that first day, constant artillery, something exploding everywhere all the time. I remember, so one of the guys there, his job was basically to act as like a relay transmitter. So he had a drone himself, but it wasn't an FPV. It had just had like this antenna on it that would like help relay the signal to make the FPV drone fly faster, or not faster, but fly with a better video feed. But I remember being in the bathroom, which was literally just like a room we were all using, with bags. And the window was open and they were flying drones. And I heard gunshots down the street, and then yelling from the guy flying like the relay drone. And it turns out that like another Ukrainian position was shooting at their drone, thinking it was a Russian one. And a couple minutes later, from where those gunshots were, we heard a Russian FPV drone just slam into it. And then probably 15 minutes later, another drone slammed into that building. Another 15 minutes goes by, another drone slams into the building. They must have gotten hit like 4 or 5 times. And then I didn't hear from them at all, like the rest of the time that we were there. So hopefully everyone was okay, that they managed to seek shelter or get into a new position. But it was something always going on. Pokrovsk also unlocked a new fear for me, which is the aerial bombs, the cabs and fabs. So they're basically guided or unguided bombs that are dropped typically in threes, and you can hear them coming in, and it's terrifying. Like, drones are pretty scary, but it's like if one hits your building, it's not going to blow the whole thing up. Like a cob or a fob, it's like 500 to like 2,000 kilos of explosives, and you can hear them coming in because it's like this, and then because you've got like 4 or 5 seconds of heads up, and they're very scary, very loud. Like all the windows were blown out in this building already, but one was so close it literally blew the doors off. So yeah, it's like there was this couch that I was sleeping on, which was right next to the basement. But like to get into the basement, it's like a hole in the floor. It's not like a door you like walk through. It's literally just a hole in the ground that you like jump in. And we had one glide bomb come in really close, and we were all dead asleep at like 1 p.m. when this happened. And so we all just tried to get into the basement at the same time, like 5 of us, and one guy actually ended up getting like moderately injured in his head, like hitting the concrete like lip of the basement door on the way down, and I had to use my IFAC to like bandage his head up and stuff like that. But it was stuff like that, just always, all the time. Artillery, mortars, the glide bombs, and lots of drones. So that's how the first day went, was just enemy FPV drones flying around in our area. Tons of artillery, like tons of it. I don't even want to know like the dollar amount of artillery that was expended during that first day. Tons of glide bombs. I think there must have been like 15 on that first day that we were there. Very scary environment. And you feel very isolated and alone out there. Like you're in the middle of a city, but it feels like you're on an island by yourself, with just you and 5 other guys. So when I went out there, I was told to pack as light as possible, because the drone position would have like places for us to sleep, the food and water and stuff like that. So in the confusion of like packing everything into the truck in the dark, we had left our 2 cases of water by the side of the road, which ended up sucking really bad because the drone position was also practically out of water when we arrived. Because that was the last day of their rotation, and they were supposed to leave that evening the same time we were. And so, yeah, about like 10 or 11 at night, we had run completely out of water, but no one was too worried because we were going to extract at about 1 a.m. So 1 o'clock in the morning rolls around, and the extract vehicle is on their way with the new drone team. And we hear on the radio that they've got to turn around because there's landmines all over the road now. And so what had happened was during the evening time, Russian bomber drones had been flying over the city and dropping mines all over the big avenues of approach. And so the team coming to exfil with us turned around and went back. And so we were out there another day. So at that point, it kind of became like a very serious concern about water, because there were 6 of us on the position and there was no more water, and we didn't know how long we were going to be out there. Like if the Russians were dropping mines on the road, we could be out there one more day, or we could be out there God knows how long. So we went foraging for water, and we ended up finding 2 expired bottles of Propel that had expired in 2023, and then a building nearby. Before it was evacuated, the former owners had been gathering rainwater from their gutters and had a whole bunch of buckets filled. And so we decided that was our only water source, was those buckets full of rainwater. So thankfully I had a new pair of Under Armour underwear in my bag. And so we had stretched that over this pot, and we strained the rainwater through my underwear into the pot and boiled that. And then we had found some noodles and stuff in a basement in a house nearby. And that's just what we had to eat and drink on the second day, was underwear, strained water, and noodles.
Some people pay a lot of money for that, mate.
Yeah.
Just being for you. So with these drop mines and stuff, though, just trying to get I'm assuming this is like a regular occurrence that this happens. So what goes on for? Have they got like units then back that just keep coming back and forth, clearing roads, or is it a case of the people who were there having to go out and clear it themselves?
I think it depends. We did send drones up to observe the roads. What we didn't see any landmines, but we did see freshly blown up vehicles. So that was like our biggest concern about extract now was the landmines. Because on the way in, I had noticed that there were a whole bunch of like shell craters in the road that were sort of unavoidable, that were full of water. So I was like, if I'm a Russian drone pilot dropping landmines, I'm going to drop them in those puddles, so they can't see them, especially on roads where it's like there's no way around it. So we flew a drone around for about an hour looking at our extract route that we were going to take to make sure there were no mines on it. And thankfully we didn't see any. Which was good. That was a lot of anxiety off of my chest, but it was still 3 o'clock in the afternoon and the sun was high. Towards the evening time, though, we did hear a lot of bomber drone movement flying over our building, and then they'd fly back. And the concerning part was we didn't hear them drop a bomb on anything. So obviously they're dropping more mines. And so as the evening is progressing, I'm getting more and more nervous that we're gonna run over a mine on the way out. I think around like 7 or 8 in the evening, we were sitting in the basement because a glide bomb had exploded pretty close by. And we're just sitting down there because there were supposed to be more in the air. And I was like leaning on the brick wall in the basement. And then I felt like an explosion through the wall on my back. And we ran up to the first floor and looked out the window. And because it sounded like a mine, like someone had driven over a mine is what it sounded like. It didn't sound like artillery or mortars or an FPV drone or anything like that. And so we get up close to the window and see like this orange glow over the street next to us from a fire. And there's a lot of smoke, and like you can smell the explosive and the smoke of like the burning vehicle, like that tires burning smell as well. And as soon as everybody stops moving in the room, we can hear someone screaming from over that direction. I remember that was like the moment that it became like very real to me, was hearing the aftermath of this vehicle run over a mine and then this man just like screaming in pain. Like, did you see like Warfare, the movie Warfare?
No, I haven't watched it, mate.
Well, it's pretty famous now because of like the scenes of the wounded in it and like how realistic those screams are. And that was the first thing that popped into my head, was that scene of one of the guys like on the ground with like his leg basically blown off, just screaming in pain. And that's what it sounded like. And that was like the first place my mind went, was that movie. And I remember just looking at Chris, because Chris Naganuma was on this trip with me again. And I like looked at him and he looked at me, and we both had this look on our faces like that could be us in a few hours. So that it got very real, listening to that, you know, because like you hear like all these stories of like from like all throughout history of like listening to people die as you're sitting in relative safety and the anxiety that brings. And that was definitely a moment for me where it was like, oh man, like this could be really bad if it doesn't work out for us. I remember just praying like that, like until we left. Basically, I was like, oh, please God, just let us get through this.
And are you a religious person usually, or was it like a battlefield and you found religion?
Not prior, definitely now. Like I go to church now. You know, that's the outcome of this. Is I attend church now and talk to God every day. But and it just got worse from there. Like, so there's technology where you can intercept drone feeds from the Russians. And so I remember we were sitting in the basement still just waiting for extract, you know, for the time where they were going to come pick us up. And typically thermal drones are quite expensive, so people are very sparing with them. I think the position we were at, there were probably like 50 FPV drones there, and maybe like 2 or 3 of them were thermal drones that they could fly at night. But we were sitting watching feed after feed after feed of Russians flying in the dark, chasing vehicles, you know, and a lot of them were on the route that we were going to take out. And so I remember I was taking a nap on the chair downstairs, and I heard like people talking around the monitor, like cheering like in a sports game, you know, like go, 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 go. And I like sat up and I looked up and I see this FPV drone chasing a Ukrainian truck. And it's like, you know, it's just another one of those things. Like I couldn't like watch the outcome of it. I just leaned back in my chair and like closed my eyes. So I didn't want to watch it because it was just going to freak me out more. But yeah, it was like that until extract. So finally extract comes. They make it to us safely down the route that we had reconned earlier with our drone. And we help them unload the truck, which is just full of explosives. So it's like if a drone hits it, like it's going. So we helped them unload all the drones, all the explosives, all their kit and stuff, because they were doing 3-day rotations back and forth. So we helped them unload. We get in. I put my body armor on, I put my helmet on, and I'm just praying. And we take off, driving down the road. And the driver is looking out for mines, and the passenger in the driver's seat is looking out for drones. And then we've got 2 guys in the back with rifles, with the canopy on the truck pulled back to shoot down any drones that chase us from the rear. And we were just praying to God that if a drone did come at us, it would come at us from the rear and not from the front. Because if it comes from the front, it's like you're dead. Like you're not going to swerve out of the way of something like that. I wasn't as scared as I thought I would be because I was too focused on filming. I was like, I didn't come this far just to F this up and not get as much footage as I can. So I filmed the whole extract, and we did see something on the road, looked like an RPG, and there's no room to drive around it, so we just drove right over it. Every time we drove through like a deep puddle, I was like, all right, this is the last moment of my life. And then, oh, I'm alive. Okay. All right, this is the last moment of my life. Oh, we're alive. Okay, and it was just like that over and over. And so the big concern was crossing the railroad, because it's quite a wide open area that you have to go slowly on, because you don't want to destroy the vehicle going 60 kilometers over bumpy terrain, especially over train tracks, because you don't want to puncture the tires, because if you puncture the tires, you're walking out of there. So that was quite scary, with driving so slowly, so out in the open, in the dark, with your headlights on, in a city where no one is moving. So it's like any drone that's flying high enough is gonna see you. So we end up getting through the train tracks without issue, thankfully. But we missed our turn to get onto the road that we were going to take. So we had to take a new route out of the city, which was unfortunate because we had not reconned any other path. So we make it through the city itself. We get back to the FPV tunnel, and there's new blown up cars at the entrance. And so we're driving through that. There's new holes in it. I remember seeing there's like a big portion of it that had like caved in from a strike, and it like the net had like dragged over the windshield and stuff when we drove through it. But we make it through, and we're driving on the open road with trees on our right-hand side. I remember looking at the moon off to my left and seeing anti-aircraft fire, firing at like it must have been Iranian Shahed drones or something. But I remember I thought it looked beautiful, like just that sight of just moving in the dark, and you've got like a nice almost full moon with like these red Star Wars lasers flying across the sky. So by this point, we're supposed to be like out of range of most drones. And so I put my big camera away, and then I saw the moon, and I thought, oh, that looks really beautiful. So I pulled out my phone to start recording it, and as soon as I press record, we hear gunshots from the back. And everyone in the truck looks at each other, and we're like, if they're shooting, there's a reason. A drone is chasing us. Initially, I had thought some like Russian special forces had like punctured the lines and we were being ambushed. Because I don't know why that's the first place my brain went to, but it was. I remember thinking like, this is how I die, like in a close ambush on the road. But turns out it was a drone. We were supposed to be out of range, but we weren't. So we're thinking it was a fiber optic cable drone. And remember earlier in our conversation when I was talking about that gas station that we had passed, that we were sitting at waiting, we drove past that. So we were quite a ways away from the city at this point. So we hear the gunshots behind us, and they're just letting loose at something. And so the driver immediately knows it's an FPV drone that's chasing us, and just puts his foot on the gas, and we go from probably like 100 kilometers an hour to I don't know, probably like 150, 160, and we outrun this drone, and we take a right, and then we see a car coming past us and going down the path we had just taken, and I was like, oh my God, like, God, please look out for these people that are going down the road we just got chased down. So we drive as fast as we can still, because we don't know if it's still chasing us or if it has turned to chase the other vehicle that had passed us. And I don't know how long we were driving. This is all such a blur in my mind, but we end up getting into a residential area, like a little village, and we are weaving around the streets, and we park under some trees, and we get back. We stop, and I get out to make sure Chris and this guy in the back are okay, and their eyes are just wide like plates, and there was a drone chasing us. Like, we saw it as it was like descending on its like attack run, and we took shots at it, and they were like stuttering their words, just so full of adrenaline. And I remember just like hugging Chris. I mean, like, you just saved our lives. Like, we'd either be dead or like very seriously wounded on the side of the road right now if you guys hadn't have seen that drone, because all they saw was like the blinking light just coming down and like onto them, and then like the silhouette of the drone with like the light of the moon behind it. And I was like, man, you guys saved our lives. I remember just being like so full of adrenaline after that. I don't know how we got to sleep. I think we got to one of the soldiers' apartments there. I probably drank like a 6-pack of beer in like 40 minutes, and we were just like, I can't believe we're alive. You know, like, that was a very crazy 2 days in Pokrovsk. And just to talk about drone density, we were there for just 2 days in a big city, and we heard or saw with our own eyes 30 to 40 FPV drones just in our little part of the city. So like, you can see and hear them like 100 meters each direction. And it's like, that's just what we saw in like a quiet little part of the city. You know, so that just goes to show like how many drone teams are operating on both sides.
That trip you were out, obviously, big change for you. What are you feeling like on the other side when you go back to the States as well? You know, because, you know, it's to have dipped into that and then caught a flight home and gone back to work. You know, it's you know, we talk about soldiers coming back from war, but you're still in the army at that point. But to actually then go into like work the next day or...
Yeah, it's been strange because I live right next to a small airport, and the little planes sound exactly like the glide bombs coming in, you know? And so now that I've been home a while, it's like I'm adjusted. I know they're planes, you know, but it's still like, I work pretty close to where I live, and so it's the same airport. And so there's like an outside playground, you know, with like a big garage door. And so I'll be outside with the kids, and I'll hear a plane coming in, and instinctively I just start walking, like backing up inside, looking at the sky. You know, it's like stuff like that I've noticed. And there's a bike trail behind my house, and so I sit down, like you can see the window behind me. It's usually open, but the sound of like bike tires driving fast on pavement sounds a lot like the buzzing of drones. And so I'll be like sitting here painting my miniatures or editing a video, and I hear that buzz, and I just look up and quickly like orient my ears to the noise. I don't know if that'll ever go away, but if it doesn't, it's still a good awareness, a skill to have. But yeah, it's weird doing that and then coming straight home, because it's not like I take a vacation. Like, I use my vacation days to go on these trips.
So, and it's at this point that we start crowdfunding to get Nick some help. And it's Are you? Well, I mean, I think this is a silly question, but are you planning on going back without giving?
Oh yeah, and that's the thing. I was trying to explain to Isabel, because there's one like that, leaving that drone position. I remember texting her and being like, "This might be the last time I ever text her." You know, like, this is real. Very, very scary, very real, very dangerous situation. But it's like I come home, and then like after a couple weeks, like I'm at that point now where it's like I need to go back. You know, I can't verbalize why I feel like I need to go back, but I need to go back to experience more of this with these soldiers. You know, because like all the time there'll be people on social media where it's like, you shouldn't put this on the internet. Like this is a social media app. It's like, if these soldiers can endure it, the very least you can do is observe it to understand what they're going for, so you can vote better.
Let's talk about that then, because the morality of things. Because I'm in two sides of it, mate. To be honest, like I think people need to see the reality of, like you said, what they vote for and what they cheerlead a lot of the time. And in my own experience, when I've written about my own experiences, and I spoke to the families of the lads who did come home, and I said to them, you know, I want to write this in detail, but I understand if you don't want to. And the parents said, no, we want people to know. That obviously, unfortunately, the internet being what it is, humans being what they are, comes with this downside of people who, like, it's kind of sickening to see people glorifying in someone else's demise, right? So I'm sorry, I'm kind of going into my own answer here. Well, should be asking yours. So, like, how is it that you feel about it?
I think that's a big reason why I do this, is to help minimize the number of people who are glorifying it, you know, so they can see and hear about how horrible this is. Like just yesterday, I uploaded a story on Instagram about the expectation versus reality of war. And then it was a story from a soldier in Bakhmut that I had interviewed. And he said they shot this guy, this Russian Wagner soldier, and he had fallen behind where they could see. So they couldn't shoot him and they couldn't throw more grenades at him, but they could hear him moaning and crying for 3 to 4 hours before he finally died. And it's like, the expectation was what you see in movies and read in books and other pop culture things, where it's like, you shoot someone and they're dead immediately. And like, that's not the reality of it. Like that guy who ran over that anti-tank mine, he was alive for at least 15 seconds after that thing blew up, and before the sound of all the barking dogs drowned out his screams, you know? And so that's a reality that most people don't think about. And it's like, that could be you. That could be any one of us. Like the United States, we're on like the cusp now of a possible conflict with Iran. You know, I think that's a perfect example of knowing who you vote for and what they're all about and what they'll get your country into. Sometimes war is necessary and unavoidable. Most cases in history, I don't think it is. And so I'm definitely not like a warmonger or anything like that. If anything, I think I'm more anti-war, because these are all human beings. And that's the other thing about going there and seeing it for yourself, is these are no longer just anonymous people in drone footage being chased around a tree or blown up or shot in the face. These are, every single one of them is a human being. You know, I interviewed one soldier, and he said the hardest moment of his life was watching his brother's funeral and seeing that his parents were the last ones to leave the funeral because they didn't know how to leave. They didn't know how to leave their little boy in the ground.
Yeah, mate. Where can people get? Because you've put out books, right?
Yeah.
People could still get copies of those?
Mm-hmm. So I'm by no means like a professional author. I'm definitely not like on your level of book writing. I'm just a dumb infantryman who basically got cyberbullied into making 2 books. And so you can find them on Amazon. It's the What War Did to Us series. The Ukrainian one is a little shadow banned, and so you need to find the direct link to it to look for it on Amazon, and you can get it Amazon UK, US, Germany, Belgium, like anywhere there's Amazon, you can find them. You can find the books on Amazon. You can find me primarily on Instagram at Battles of Beers War Stories, and I have a YouTube as well of the same name.
I'll put the direct link and all the other stuff in the notes. So I always say show notes, but I've started to think maybe people don't know what show notes are. Where you're looking on what's playing right now, if you scroll down, those are the show notes. There's a little blurb in there. So go down there, check them out. The links will be in there to Nick and to the book and everything. And please don't start doing writing full time, mate, because you're far too good at what you do, and I could do without the competition. So you do the crazy stuff. Go to the front line, and I'll sit in my cozy office and write, if that's okay by you. Mate, I was hoping we were going to have some time for talking about Warhammer, but unfortunately, I've been called away. I just want to thank you so much for your time today, mate, and for everything that you do, honestly, mate, because I do think it's incredibly important work, and not only right now as well, but, you know, thanks to work that you're doing on this and others out there as well doing it, you know, this will be very documented for future generations, because the sad part of the matter is a lot of these lads will not be around to tell the stories themselves. And to be able to capture them so fresh, you know, because most of the time when it comes to wars, people aren't interviewed 50, 60 years later, you know. So to get these from people while they're in there, mate, while they're young, I mean, I think it's incredible work, and just keep up the good work, mate.
Thank you. I appreciate it a lot.
All right, mate. All the best, and hope we can have you again on soon, mate, after your next trip.
Yeah, of course. Thank you for having me.
All right, guys, there you have it. Thank you very much to Mr. Nick Laidlaw for giving up his time and for bringing these stories to us. Really do appreciate it, and really do appreciate you guys listening, taking a couple of hours out of your time to join us. All we ask in return is that if you have enjoyed today's podcast, learned from it, found any kind of value in it, please do follow our guest if you're not doing so already. If you'd like to support him with his books, those are linked down in the show notes, which is basically all that text that's below the press play button. I don't know. I'm a boomer. I can't explain it any better than that. But the other thing that we ask is tell a mate. If you've enjoyed today's episode, please give it a share on social media. Please directly text a link to one of your friends. Help us grow the podcast, because if you think that these stories are worthwhile, then someone else will do too. We don't run ads, and that's so you guys don't have to sit through them. But the downside of that is we don't get revenue from the podcast to pay for advertising. So in return for not chucking adverts on the podcast, we just ask that you guys share the show. All right, guys, thanks very much again for listening. We will be back next week with another episode. Until then, be good to each other, be kind to each other, and we'll catch you again very soon.